Hey guys, this is Dustin and Evan. We're back with another episode of the Red and White Podcast. This week we took a little bit of a different approach here, and we were joined by the fellows from the Riddick Reynolds Podcast. We had a little roundtable discussion talking about the season that was, their thoughts on Dave Doeren, Matt Canada leaving, all that kind of good stuff. We had a really good time in recording it. I think there's some good stuff there, and hope you all enjoy listening to it.
All right, guys. Welcome to a special crossover episode of the Riddick and Reynolds Podcast and the Red and White Podcast. We've mentioned Dustin and Evan in their show a few times on our show. We've playfully called it one of the greatest podcast rivalries in history. But happy to do a crossover show. This was their idea. Dustin and Evan, you guys pipe in, let the folks know how this came about. I was all for it. I'm glad we're finally getting a chance to do this.
I think it is the greatest podcast rivalry. I don't know any others. So I think this is the one.
Yeah, that voice you hear is Evan, and Dustin's pipe in here.
The idea came, initially I had thought of this grand Anchorman style fight between the two crews, but I figured this might just go over easier if we try and be nice. So
we can't say the rivers run red with red and white's blood?
Well, you go ahead. I like that. It's also a good analogy for the football season. So.
Yes, that's true.
Man, I'm trying to figure out which television crew we would be. I'm kind of leaning towards Telemundo, but
Como están, beaches? Yeah, definitely. Gotta be Ben Stiller all the way, man.
Yeah. We wanted to do a football recap show, and we waited naturally until the Belk Bowl, and here we are. It's I don't think we all have any pleasant thoughts about the way the football game.
I'm just now drying out, honestly.
Should we start with the ball game itself, perhaps, and then lead into how that capped off the rest of the season, or vice versa? You think?
Sure. I thought it was a train wreck. Anybody else have any thoughts on that one?
That's pretty succinctly sums it up. The only real chance was that dropped punt that obviously got called back. So
yeah,
you can't really rely on that.
And I think when we all saw the very first play of the game be an interception deep in our own territory, that definitely set the tone. That was a tone setter, as it were.
Yeah, I was just getting in and had just turned to walk up the stairs in the section. I wasn't even watching the game when that happened, and I really just kind of wanted to turn around and walk out.
I think for me the most frustrating part was that all year we've played better on the road, and then we've played better in games where we've had some time to prepare, and then you come out and guys run the wrong way, Jacoby's turning the wrong way, and he's throwing the ball to the wrong team, and then you're like, what in the F just happened?
Yeah.
Like, that's not the way you just looked unprepared. You looked like a high school team going out there.
Yeah. We talked all year about how it felt like, and we'll get into the recent change at offensive coordinator, but it felt like, one of Matt Canada's strengths was his ability to kind of script the first, series or two of the game. We would come out strong, and then, we would struggle later in the game to get back to what was working, it seemed like. But this was, like you said, Evan, this was an instance where it just felt like from the jump, State just did not look prepared at all.
That was the most frustrating part for me, was just seeing that. There's 3 weeks to prepare. The play is going to be run the first play. They probably knew this 2 weeks ago, and then that happens. And
they also knew that Manny Diaz runs a high blitzing offense, and the first play they just rushed 6 guys, and 2 people didn't even get touched. And that was, that's the play call was weird to begin with, but that was the big reason is Jacoby took one step and had to just fling the thing.
Now, was that a blown blitz pickup on DeQuay's part?
Somebody just didn't read it, I think. Because I think they were outnumbered. I think somebody went out in the flat or something, if I recall, and then all of a sudden two linebackers just came flying through in between like the right guard and tackle, I think.
Well, whoever's in motion just completely either went the wrong way or missed what he was supposed to be doing, which I'm assuming was blocking that guy coming off the corner.
Yeah.
Because Jacoby knew where he wanted to throw it.
Yeah.
At least it looked like he knew where he wanted to throw it, and then didn't know what to do after, he's got a linebacker bearing down on him.
Yeah. I think all four of us would probably just fling the ball if that was happening too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dak Prescott would have thrown it for a touchdown, though.
Yeah. You mean Ben Simmons would have thrown it for a touchdown?
Yeah. God, could you imagine them on the same team?
Yeah, Dak was good. I'll give him credit. They played like a well-coached team, and they were pretty sound all year. They've had fumble issues, and when we talked to the guys from Mississippi State, they said the same thing. We have a negative turnover ratio, and it's all because of fumbles, not because of Prescott. Mm-hmm. But in the pouring rain, they held onto the ball for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah, I kept waiting for those fumbles to show up, and they just never did.
Yeah.
So it was a rough start, and as the game wore on, I mean, we got to within 10 at one point in the third quarter, but just never sharp all day. There was the play. Jacoby has looked great at times doing it with his hidden ball trick play, and he just held it for 2 beats too long, and by the time I'm sure I didn't see the overall field, but I imagine he probably had somebody open, but it was too late at that point. And again, I don't know if that was somebody missing an assignment and picking up a guy, or I'm trying to recall the play as it unfolded. If maybe Mississippi State's guy just blew up the block and got to him before he could get rid of it, but that's something we had seen Kobe do well throughout the season, and he didn't look sharp. Defensively, of course, we've had issues all year long, but it just
So I think where it was disappointing from the defensive side was their offensive line was their weak point. All year they've given up a ton of sacks. Everybody's complained about their offensive line, and then our defensive line has been our strong point for the most part of the year. Other than a few big plays, they've played pretty well, and then they just got manhandled.
Yeah,
and that was really disappointing too.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the strength of probably the whole team outside of the running backs preseason, but and the fact that they couldn't get really any pressure. Prescott he's a very good quarterback, but he had all day.
Yeah, he had all day. I mean, I'm pretty sure Dustin could have picked apart that defense with that much time.
How much of that was talent differential?
I don't think so. I think our defensive line is talented, and I don't know their offensive line, but
I think recruiting wise and whatnot, their offensive line is probably fairly similar to our defensive. Now, player development and whatnot, I don't know, but pure talent and size standpoint, I would think it would have been at least an even matchup.
Yeah, the fact that we couldn't get any pass rush with our front four, I think I saw some people wanting to, get a little bit more aggressive, but, you start sending extra guys to get after Prescott, he would just pick you apart. So, trying to throw a lot of, blitzes here or there probably would have not worked out much better in our favor. He just would have had even more opportunities to throw the ball down the field. So, yeah, that was disappointing for sure.
I think the whole game was disappointing, and it's kind of a summation of the season. I mean, it's kind of what I know I thought we'd do a little bit better this year. So the whole 2015 season was, I think was pretty disappointing. What do y'all think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about pretty disappointing. I do feel disappointed coming away from it. I felt like if we had won that game and finished, 8-5, I'd feel certainly much better than I feel right now. But I don't know that I would classify it as disappointment. I'd feel like we were, holding steady. Could have won a couple of, games that, we'll always talk about the Louisville and Virginia Tech games as games that got away from us that we probably should have won. But, it would be kind of hard to complain about 8-5 with a good win against Mississippi State. But, now you look at, the fact that Doeren still hasn't won against a team that, would be considered a better team than State, or even really in kind of the same tier. We beat Carolina last year, but they were struggling defensively, and Lord knows they look a lot better this year. We're still sitting in a spot where our only wins in conference tend to be Wake, Boston College, and Syracuse. So beating Mississippi State would have been a good way to end the season. It feels disappointing now.
Yeah, I think that's what it kind of summarized, that if we had won that game, you could kind of see a little bit of momentum, saying, all right, we won at Wake, we won at BC, beat Mississippi State. But losing that and then losing all the other games, to me that's disappointing.
Yeah. And I'm kind of disappointed that it was the second year with Jacoby, and I don't know that we saw a much better Jacoby, this year versus last. I feel like there was potential there that just wasn't fully reached throughout the season, and for him to play the way he did in that game against Mississippi State in the Belk Bowl, I don't know. I wouldn't call it a fitting end to his career, because that would be kind of unfair, but it maybe in some ways was kind of indicative of just kind of how up and down things have been this year, and unfortunately that was kind of a down game for him. So, and I think the other thing too is you look at as the season ended, a lot of programs in the ACC, not a lot, but there were a few that had coaching changes, and it seemed like all the ones who made coaching changes all made upgrades. And so, State's still trying to get kind of a nice win under its resume, and it's now seeing that the rest of the league is upgrading its coaching talent. And so things are getting that much more difficult. So,
yeah, the coaches in the Coastal, I mean, that's a complete 180.
Yeah.
And that should be kind of a warning sign for State. If they don't get it together, that's going to be a rough patch there.
Yeah, we've been lucky to kind of sit through like mediocrity, but now you can easily end up at the bottom of the barrel. And that may be why they're starting to make some staff changes, whether they're making them or the other coaches are leaving. But you can easily end up in the Wake, BC, Syracuse level if you don't keep up.
Yeah, and watching Louisville in their bowl game with Lamar Jackson, just God, he's going to be a problem for State and for the rest of the Atlantic.
Yeah,
I mean it's and Clemson's young. Florida State's going to be Florida State. So
Florida State returns everybody from that offense.
That's cool.
And I mean, assuming they don't go pro.
Yeah,
I'm sure one or two might, but still, that's not bad at all. And Clemson was the youngest team in the country, I think.
And see, that's the frustrating part for me, is that you look like Louisville. I was watching that Louisville game, and they look like a better coached team than us. I don't think they have that much more talent than us, and they're playing a freshman quarterback. But they went out there and played Texas A&M, and they played well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the frustrating thing for me is people go, well, this team's still just young. This is still just year 3. And I know there wasn't a whole lot left. I had a conversation with somebody today. Like, the roster wasn't stacked, but I mean, Mike Rose was an all-ACC player. Thuney, Burris turned out pretty well. There was some talent there, but the team was still young. But people just used the youth as an excuse. And, it's part of the reason maybe for the struggles, but you can still win with a young team.
Well, I was talking with somebody, there's, and Matt, since you're kind of a big recruiting guy, you can talk to this,
Mm-hmm.
the upper 4-star and the 5-star guys are guys that can come in young and contribute immediately.
Mm-hmm.
They're 18-year-old kids who have the, bodies of 25-year-olds. It's disturbing almost to see what the hormones can do to kids these days. But the guys that the majority of college football programs are stocking their rosters with, probably do need to be seasoned a little bit. So, I think it's tougher for a State, and other programs in the ACC that aren't Florida State and Clemson to bring in youth and have it, contribute right away. It needs a little bit more time to develop, and so yes, it's tough. It's tough when you see programs with youth, see them perform at a high level. But I think we do have to also consider that the youth that the Clemsons and the Florida States of the world are bringing in is not the same as what the rest of the college football world is bringing in.
That's true, but the youth at Louisville, it's got to be similar to us. There's other schools that are winning with players and young teams. Mm-hmm. When you're NC State and you're recruiting 3 stars, occasional 4 stars, some 2 stars, not the highest level guys. You've got to win with better coaching and better schemes. Mm-hmm. And that's what a 7-6 season is showing me. It was kind of the same as last year. They didn't really learn anything.
They're winning what their recruiting rankings are. I know it's kind of phrase funny, but they're beating the teams that they're naturally better than, and they're never beating. They literally have not beaten a team that is quote better than them. And that's where the worry is. You can't fault Doeren for winning the games he's supposed to win. That's something that O'Brien didn't do very well. So I'll absolutely give him that credit. But at some point, you got to outcoach somebody, and it doesn't really seem like maybe that's happened yet. And I think that's the concern. UNC last year, the teams were pretty even, and obviously that game was completely one-sided. And then it flipped again this year. So that'd be the one time where maybe you could say they thoroughly outcoached somebody, and that was a big difference in the win. But outside of that, I think that's the concerning part. And, maybe recruits are starting to see that. If you don't start winning, you won't be able to even out-recruit the lower, the lower teams.
It's what it comes down to. If you look at, to me, I always look at a school like Baylor, who for most of the 2000s was terrible. 1990s to 2000s, they were awful. They were winless many times. And then Art Browse comes in, they start running a spread, kind of a unique spread. They're recruiting, faster guys that kind of fit that system. He scores a lot of points, beats a few big teams, or makes it exciting. And now he's got a top 10 program that's just rolling.
Yeah.
And I think NC State could be Baylor or TCU or something. Maybe the Texas talent's better, but the point is that they're winning with better coaching and better schemes. And I think that was what I was missing this season.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Texas talent is better, and it's kind of like Florida. You can, as Chuck Amato tried to do, here at NC State, you can go into Florida and get some of the kids that the Miamis and the Floridas and the Florida States weren't getting, or were kind of backup offers to those kids, and bring them in, and you could win with some of those guys. But yeah, I mean, your point's right. When it's hard to be upwardly mobile in college football if you're only beating the teams that you are on talent or on paper should beat, and losing to the teams on paper that you should lose to, because you're not elevating yourself in the world any higher than where you are on paper. And Evan, you're right. The Art Browse of the world, the ones who are doing it with lesser talent, using coaching as a way to swing the balance in their favor. So,
and to tack on to the Texas point about Baylor being in Texas, they're outperforming Texas A&M, Texas Tech. So all you can really do to get to that next level is to outperform the people nearest you, and then move from there. And that's kind of how they've done it. So that's what really, I guess the difference will be beating North Carolina, Wake Forest, Duke, and then Virginia Tech, winning all the kids in those area. And that's going to be kind of the next step. And then you can get the Florida and the Georgia kids maybe.
You go ahead, Dustin. Sorry.
It's 2 years in a row that we've lost to the Florida State games. Stick out in my mind. We should have had them 2 years in a row, and either one of those games would have done huge things for the program.
Right.
And I think he can coach because we were in the position that we were in both those games, but there's like a switch that gets flipped second quarter every time, and we just lose every bit of momentum / game plan / everything that we had going. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand what that problem is.
And that's, to me, that's coaching. There's something in there that they're not either adjusting to. So, Florida State is a perfect example. Last year, up was it 35-7 on Florida State at halftime, and then FSU goes into the locker room. They come out, and Jimbo Fisher's good at adjusting at halftime. They come out and they just cleaned our clock. I mean, they found the weak points, they picked on it, and we didn't do anything to adjust. We was like, all right, we'll keep doing what we're doing, and that didn't work. And that was, that's what we've seen that a few times.
Same thing this year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Winning there, nonetheless. That would have been huge to get a win there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
So how much of that is, in y'all's mind, the coordinators? How much of it is Doeren?
I use this maybe too much, but in the end, it's on Doeren because he's the one that picks the coordinators, sets the philosophies, and they're the ones that kind of run these plays. He kind of, it's the manager's always in charge of the people below him and is responsible for their reaction, their actions, I guess. So obviously he takes a big share of it. And the whole thing with Canada is that, the numbers looked okay at the end of the season, but it was more game management situations. Continuing to, like you just said a minute ago, let's keep doing the same thing. Maybe the sweep play worked once or twice, but you keep working it against these really good teams, and they're just going to snuff it out every time. It seemed like they kind of ran out of their bag of tricks pretty early on, and then just kind of ran the same old game plan. So I think in the end, it has to be on Doeren because he's in charge, but the coordinators are obviously, they have to pick the individual plays. It's got to be pretty even in the end.
It all seemed to me that, Doeren wants to be kind of a manager, kind of hands off during the games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the assistants he had, that's kind of backfired, or has. I think that kind of is backfiring on him.
Right.
Do you feel like he had enough experience as a head coach coming into this gig? Did he maybe make this leap up to the Power 5 without enough, he knows football and he knows, I guess how to be a coordinator, but, becoming a CEO of a Power 5 program, I'm sure carries with it certain other challenges like managing your coordinators at a level that maybe he wasn't prepared for.
Dustin, you want to take that?
I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think he took a hands-off approach, and offensively, like Matt said, the numbers ended up okay. And I kind of look at that more as, we scored, but I think he may have made hires that he shouldn't have had, or shouldn't have made, but I think he might have stuck with them too long. And I don't think
given them
he's
too
not
much
capable.
Autonomy.
Yeah, I think if you see the defense is struggling and you have a defensive background, then step in and kind of take over the defense if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all thought that was happening last year when
they turned the switch for like 5 games.
they moved Huxtable up to the box, and you're thinking, all right, well, Huxtable's in the box. I don't know any defensive coordinators that are up in the box other than him. And so you're thinking, Dave Doeren's running this defense. And, hey, look, they won the last 6 games or 5 last 6 games, and the defense was the big part of that.
Mm-hmm.
But, I do think going back to James's question, I think there's a bit of learning on the job. Yeah. And I'm okay with that because I think he's a good guy. I think he's the right guy. And like y'all said, I think some of the assistants, he's kind of stuck with them a little too long. And, the Matt Canada thing, can bring it up. He fired Matt Canada today or yesterday.
Well, maybe this is a good spot to take a break and hear a word from our sponsors, and we'll come back and talk about some coaching changes in the program and where we go from here.
If there's one thing state fans do well, it's tailgate. And I know for me, the most important part of a tailgate is a well-packed cooler. You have to ask yourself 2 questions. How clean is your cooler, and how cold are your drinks? Nobody wants to reach into a dirty cooler and grab a warm beer. Now, I've put rock salt in my coolers for years to try and chill beverages a little bit quicker, but a lot of times I'll either use too little or too much, and I'll have a can filled with slush. I'm also guilty of being a little bit lazy when it comes to cleaning the cooler after I'm finished with it. Then I found Frostbite CoolerSalt. This isn't just salt, it's salt combined with safe and organic ingredients that clean your cooler while it's getting your beer super cold. The really cool part is that it doesn't just clean your cooler, but it cleans everything that goes into it. So when you pull that beer out, it's not just going to be super cold, but the can itself is actually going to be germ-free. And it comes conveniently packaged with the perfect amount to sprinkle over 20 pounds of ice. You can find it in a growing number of stores in the Raleigh area as well as online if you're outside the Triangle. So check out CoolerSalt.com, that's C-O-O-L-E-R salt.com, to find the closest location to you and see how you can have a clean and cold cooler every time. Frostbite Cooler Salt. Colder, faster, cleaner.
All right, so let's talk about the aforementioned coaching change. Word came down yesterday pretty late. It was, I think, around midnight.
Yeah.
Last night that Matt Canada had been let go, and I think today we saw that the offensive line coach, Mike Urimovich, might be leaving for Northern Illinois to become their offensive coordinator, which I guess is where he coached at with Doeren while he was there, if I'm not mistaken. So he's returning back to a familiar spot. So State's now down its coordinator and also one of its position coaches. So I guess let's talk about the move. Do you think this was a Doeren move or was this a Debbie Yao move?
I think there was a Doeren move. There's been a lot of rumors of friction between Doeren and Canada and some other people. So I think there was something there. But I think it's more of a Doeren move. I think he realized while the offense was probably pretty good this year in some aspects, I think they believe it underperformed, especially in games where it mattered. So Louisville, Virginia Tech scoring 13 points, coming out slow in some of these other games. I think that's part of it. And then the other part I think was Jacoby didn't take a huge step forward this year. I think he kind of, everybody was expecting a little bit more out of him, and I don't think he got it. I think that comes down. That's on Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the quarterback's coach too. So.
Yeah.
I think I agree with that, and also the telling comment maybe after the bowl game about we couldn't really get Jalen the ball.
Yeah.
I think that was maybe a hint of like, hey, it really wasn't my call to not use him. I don't really know what we were doing to not get him the ball. That's kind of how I read into it a little bit.
All right, I want to touch on that because that comment struck a nerve with me a little bit. All right, you're the head coach, and maybe this speaks to Evan's point about there being some off-field friction between the two of them. But you're the head coach. I mean, if you feel like Jalen's not getting enough touches, you have the authority as the head coach to call up to Mr. Canada and say, get him the ball.
Right.
We need to, he's one of our best weapons, especially that, Gillespie was out. We need to get him, going. I thought that was, I don't know, I guess flash forward to where we're at now, maybe it makes a little bit more sense why that comment was made, but it did seem very odd to me that you as a head coach would say, we just couldn't get him the ball, like as if your authority with the program has a stopping point somewhere.
Right. He sounds like a fan at a bar. Oh man, we really just couldn't get him going today. That's what that kind of reminded me of like, well, you kind of had some say in that in some form or fashion.
I don't know if he was alluding to, and I don't want to give him an out because I do agree with you guys. I thought it was a little strange, and coach has got to step in there. But I don't know if he was alluding to Mississippi State focusing on Jalen Samuels and then just not being able to get him open or get it run what they were trying to do for him. Mm-hmm. There might be a little bit of that in that comment, but I think probably more of it. It's just some of us can't help being a little bit snarky, and I think that might have a little Tom O'Brien sub-snark to it there.
Sniff.
Yeah. So, to me, I agree. The coach has got to step in. Coach has got to say, hey, this scheme's not working. Do something else, or do this. Right? I mean, he's got to know football well enough to.
Yeah.
To be
Wasn't Jalen's first touch pretty much just a flea flicker back to Jacoby, and then he touched the ball for like another quarter or something like that?
Yeah, he touched it 3 times and scored 2 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so maybe I don't know. Maybe use it more.
So this is kind of what I was. When that happened last night, what I kind of do is I typically go to Reddit and see what they're saying, and seeing what the other teams' fans are saying. I know what our fans are going to say, but University of Wisconsin fans, where Canada was, they kind of all the comments are about the same. So that we're not surprised. He's a smart play caller, but he's also a master of outsmarting himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I think that was kind of an example. He always tried to do, trickerations and weird formations and things that just didn't work. He was trying to be the smartest guy in the stadium when, if you have a finely tuned team, that might work.
Yeah.
But you got to work with what you have, and I just don't think he was doing that. And I think that's kind of where the fit problem was.
Yeah, I mean, I joked. I know I did during the game, but I think I had before other times about, if everybody expects us to utilize Jalen Samuels, then, by God, they'll never see us not going to Jalen.
They'd have to be stupid not to do it.
He'll be our decoy the entire game.
Yeah.
So you say that, and then what I always come back to is look at schools like ECU or schools like Houston, or maybe not Baylor because they have a lot of talent now, but look at what they're doing offensively with theoretically lesser talent. ECU's recruiting 2-star non-qualifiers, and they hung 70 on Carolina last year. Or the numbers they put up in general when they had Lincoln Riley. When you have a good offensive coordinator, you can do these kind of things.
Mm.
And to me, that's what we were missing. I think that's especially in those close games, the games that we really needed to win: Carolina, Louisville, Virginia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
I meant to ask this in the first segment, but do you think the loss of Shad and Days maybe impacted us in ways that we wouldn't normally think, not just offensively, but perhaps defensively, and not being able to sustain drives?
Absolutely, yes. Across the board.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
So let me ask you this: how much of a pass do you guys give him for this season, based on losing your two best running backs?
I mean, he gets a little bit for that, but it's football, so every team usually has devastating injuries somewhere. And State was fortunate enough to have someone like Gillespie, and Nichols doesn't set the world on fire, but he's not half bad. You got Hines and Samuels you can plug in there, so it's kind of a double-edged sword there because he did a good job building the roster with guys like that. But everyone has injuries, and it counts for something. I mean, obviously, if you have Shad and Days those last few games, things are going to look a lot better, barring something miraculously terrible happening. But they also lost games when they had them. Not many people have a first string back as good as Matt Days, and we had one second. He was second string coming in, theoretically, and during Louisville, Virginia Tech, games like that, and they still couldn't win those. If you win two of those games and you still lose the games that we lost at the end of the season without Days, then the season doesn't look that bad. So it's kind of hard to measure, but he does get a little bit of leeway with it, I guess.
Yeah, I think it actually, impacts the way I view the defensive coordinatorship with Huxtable, if anything. Just in, I try to imagine how the defense would have looked if they didn't seem so gassed at points in the game. I don't know how much you can theoretically say, well, we would have extended this drive, or maybe we wouldn't have had as many 3-and-outs, and therefore would the defense have had more legs later in games. But at the same time, there were times where our defense was just way out of position, and that doesn't have anything to do with being exhausted. It just means they were out of position. Mm-hmm. So, I think I after talking myself in circles about it, I think, I probably came to the conclusion that maybe we win one of the two Louisville or Virginia Tech games, and 8 and what would that be? That would 8-5,
mm-hmm.
even if we lost the Mississippi State game. I mean, it's gosh, if we'd won that Virginia Tech game in Blacksburg, that would be a nice win to have finally under Doeren's belt, and maybe the season does feel a little bit better, or maybe that we had taken a small step forward, or at least kept even with where we were headed, versus what feels like a step back now. So
I think that was key, and we were just talking about Jalen Samuels not getting the ball in the bowl game. I think it was the Virginia Tech game where Matt Days didn't get the ball hardly at all, and you're like, why are you not running?
that was very strange.
Yes.
I know that was the case in the Louisville game. I remember vividly wondering why we were not running the football more against Louisville, because Jacoby was having a poor day passing the ball, and it seemed like, and I know that Days had at least one huge run for a score, I think, or maybe it was Samuels. And I was sitting there in the rain with my son, like, son, I don't know why they're not just running football. I had no answers. So, yeah, Matt, you're right. Even with Days in the Louisville and Virginia Tech game, we still lost those two games. So, maybe having Shad and Days the whole season makes a difference. Maybe we steal another one along the way somewhere. But you can't really attribute the Louisville and Virginia Tech games to not having Matt Days, because we did. So.
And you're bringing up, somebody brought up defense, and I know Huxtable is on everybody's radar because they feel like the defense hasn't performed, and I tend to agree. They're ranked higher than our offense was in most defensive categories. If if you go compare apples to apples, and for the most part, other than some big plays, they didn't play too bad. We didn't get a whole lot of turnovers and some stops where Riley Nicholson pushes Marquise out of bounds or whatever and gets a flag, and that changes that whole game. And this is just a couple of those plays where there may be young mistakes or whatnot, but I don't think they were too awful. I don't think our scheme's great, so that's on Huxtable, but I feel a little bit better that the offense is going to make some changes, because I really feel strongly that we need to go into a spread-type offense.
So I guess a good question for the group would be, or if you could have picked, and I guess, Evan, we already know your answer, but if you could have picked the two coordinators, which of the two would you have replaced if you had your druthers? You would have picked Canada and got your wish. I might have gone, or I guess I would have gone with Huxtable, but I hadn't looked at the numbers like you did, and I was actually a little surprised to hear you say that they favored the defense as far as against the averages versus our offense. I would have guessed otherwise, and maybe that's just because I have PTSD from some of those huge plays during the year. Matt, what would you say? Would you have replaced Huxtable or Canada?
It's been tough for me to figure out. I'm not a fan of dumping both coordinators unless you're in like Mike London's situation was this year or something, where you're just like, all right, let's just do drastic measures. I guess in hindsight, I'm probably okay with Canada, knowing, kind of Evan alluded to, there may have been some discord there. And just the big time, when you need a big play, it just seemed like couldn't really get any of those. Whereas I think defense is a little easier to make adjustments as a coordinator philosophy-wise. I think, Doeren and Canada and Huxtable, especially with Doeren's, quote, expertise in the defensive side, maybe they can sit down and come to some kind of working agreement, or, hey, let's change our philosophy a little bit. Whereas offense, people tend to be a little more stubborn, stuck in their ways. And so I think I'm okay with this one, with Canada, just because I think – things can change a little more dramatically than maybe the defense would. I think defense is a little bit more athletes and base scheme more than individual play calls. And I think if you have somebody calling some different plays, maybe it can change things up a little bit. Maybe, the defense isn't, just trying to keep you in it, and they can actually play a little more aggressively and less scared. So I guess I'd go with Canada.
Yeah. Dustin?
I would go Huxtable. We talked about did losing the two running backs have an effect on the defense? And you brought up, well, yeah, we might have had some 3 and outs where they were on the field longer and got tired. But if I look at let's say the Carolina game. The defense single-handedly lost us that game. They weren't tired. It was a rival, so they should have been up. And all of a sudden it's 35-0, I think it was.
Yeah.
Like, just like that. And if you that's the last game of the season, your scheme should be sound enough. You know what Carolina's going to do. I mean, there was no reason for that, and it had been the same thing all year. The secondary was just dreadful, and there was no improvement. It just wasn't there for me. It was the same way. This whole season was like the first half of last season. Mm-hmm. And somehow, schematically, we changed our philosophy last year to end the year, and that just went away, and we never chose to do that again this season with a better line, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's big problems there. I think with a better defense, we win a game that we didn't win this year.
Mm-hmm.
VT, especially.
Yeah, that was a team that struggled pretty mightily against everyone else. Had,
we
what,
turned
35
their
points
season
or something?
around.
Yeah.
We're a slump buster. I don't know. I think we had enough. We scored enough points to win that game. I think that there was such a collapse. It was the Carolina game, the Florida State game, where they just came back and did whatever they wanted on us in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Huxtable, 100%.
I think, I understand Dustin's point for sure. For me personally, I feel a little more comfortable keeping Huxtable if Doeren is going to step in and say, hey, I need to have some influence on this defense. We need to change things up. I don't think he's apt to do that with an offensive guy because maybe he's not, offensive minded or whatever. I think coaches kind of get pegged into those holes, but maybe that's part of why I feel comfortable. All right, Huxtable, if Doeren can impart something on that, then maybe we're a little bit better off.
I tweeted that exact thing out this morning, that I figured no change on the defensive side meant Doeren was going to have a bigger hand in it. I think he's got to.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw this morning that Huxtable's contract is expired, or it's up.
It will after this year, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's sometime this summer is when his contract needs to be renewed by.
Oh, is it expired this season or at the end of 2016?
I think it's at the end of 2016. Was the impression I was under.
Okay, I thought it was the end of 2015.
That would just be too easy.
Yeah. Oh, hey, we can just make a change and we don't have to fire anybody. But
but pull a Ruffin McNeil on him and just yank the offer.
Yeah.
I think Doeren has made he's firing Canada, but he's also fired McNutt and fired who was the other one?
Well, there was a reasoning for the McNutt one.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then the other one, who's the other?
Frisman Jackson.
Oh yeah, Frisman Jackson. Yeah.
Yeah, Barlow came in for McNutt, and then Jackson went out, and then McDonald came in for that. I think those are the only two other ones that we've had any turnover.
Yeah, so we lost those two. Yaramovich leaves,
and it sounds like Faulkner may be leaving too.
Yeah, I just saw that.
But you can't do anything about that.
Yeah, the guys are going up. That's fine. That means you have good assistance.
Right.
But Doeren has showed the ability to say, hey, you guys aren't working, whether it's personal things or some other stuff, whatever. He's made the changes, so I really like that about him. And I really like Doeren. I'm pulling for him.
Mm. Well, this OC hire is going to determine his job.
Yep.
I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah.
You're going to pull the trigger. Strike one is hiring a guy that deserves to be fired, apparently. Strike two is waiting longer than you should. So he's got the keys. He's got to make the right call.
And I think he's actually, with the OC position, I think there is some attractiveness to that position these upcoming years. I mean, McClendon's only going to be a sophomore, but if he doesn't work, you got Myers. But McClendon's got a gun of an arm. You got Samuels, you got Hines, you got Frazier, Gillespie, Days, obviously. Somebody that can, we're talking about spread, a little quick strike kind of coordinator may actually be really attracted to the situation.
I think we have a lot of little fast guys. And so, that spread with Sessoms and Hines and everybody else, I think that's it is an attractive job. I think it should be, and we have the money to pay. I think that we're paying high-end offensive coordinator salary.
I think Canada was $500K, and if he gets a job that makes less, then we only have to pay him the difference and things like that. So I think the money's there.
Well, the Niners just fired Jim Tomsula, so maybe we can get Steve Logan.
Oh God!
Yeah, except he hates recruiting, so
and he doesn't like NC State. So people stop talking about Steve Logan.
He did like them, and he did like them enough to at least go to Emilio's every Monday for a full season.
Yeah, he put up some asshole with a podcast.
Oh, that's right.
So I guess he doesn't have a deep down every fiber of my being hates State thing going on. So
he likes State enough to get free food and wine.
Plus, I was gonna say money talks. So you never know.
So let me ask y'all a question. I keep talking myself in circles about the whole football program in general. It's like
I think we all are, to be fair.
Yeah, I think Doeren inherited a just complete dumpster fire. I mean, I don't think there's anybody left from the 2012 class.
There's like 5 kids left or something like that.
Yeah.
And they're all backups for the most part. And
he's shown a little bit of progress. I like him, but at the same time, there's some frustrating things about it. So, I mean, how do y'all feel about it? How do you feel about the program in general?
I'm adamantly against making a head coaching change at this point. I mean, I'm a pretty staunch give a guy 5 years type guy.
I'm fine with that too.
Yeah. I mean, and we'll know by year 5 where we stand. I don't think it'll be any doubt at that point. If we're still middling around with 7 wins, with 4 of them coming against, scrub out of conference teams, which doesn't look like it's going to be the case looking at some of the upcoming schedules. But, if we're still, eking in the bowl games in year 5, I don't think Debbie's going to have any hesitation making a change. I think Dustin's right. I mean, this offensive coordinator coaching hire is really going to define the rest of the Dave Doeren era. And if he hits a home run with a great guy who comes in and brings in a scheme that works, and we're suddenly, putting up oodles of points, then I think things will be right back to fine and dandy. And you're right, Evan. I mean, I think we're still trying to dig ourselves out of the last few, inches of that hole that Tom O'Brien kind of left us in from a talent standpoint. And, I think, like I mentioned, we're a young team, but we're a young team with kids who need time to develop. So, we're not going to be bringing in kids who can contribute right away. We're probably going to have, in order to be successful, we're going to need a roster of 2 deep that has juniors and seniors on it versus freshmen and sophomores. So, I still am, in Doeren's camp. I'm eager to see what this offensive coordinator hire looks like. I probably will try to gauge based on the fan base of wherever this guy comes from. If they say, "Oh shit, we can't believe we lost him to," scrubby old NC State, then I'm gonna feel pretty good about things. And if it turns out like Wisconsin fans saying, "Oh, good luck with Canada," then,
Yeah, I had a coworker that said that he went to Wisconsin and he was like, "Oh, you'll have fun with that one." I was like, "Okay." that was, and they backtracked a little and tried to play it up for me, but. It was, that was my first, I wonder, because, they came in with this whole, let's do a blend of Wisconsin and Oregon, and sure, that sounds great. I mean, like we were mentioning Baylor earlier. Sure, I'd love to be Baylor right now. But, when you hear it from the actual fan base, the people that have watched the play calling for 3-4 years, you're kind of like, okay, maybe there's there's a peg back to reality there.
And I kind of hate it when smug assholes like that get proven right, but
right.
Sometimes there's more truth in it, from somebody who's lived it rather than, when you hire a guy, you want to just see all the positives and all the optimistic things that this person can do. Mm-hmm. You're probably not looking too much at some of the weaker areas. So
let me rephrase my question, because I think we're all reasonable, and I think we're, unless Dustin's hammered, I think we're all reasonable in that 5 years. We give Doeren 5 years because that's what you need for a football program. Dustin and I have talked about it ad nauseum that
17's it.
It takes a long time to turn a football program around. You know, but at the same time, I guess my question is, do you feel that in 5 years, Doeren is going to have made enough is making now enough progress to be that by that point will be still the right guy to lead our football program? That's all. That's what I'm trying to ask.
I guess if you asked me after year one was a completely clean slate. If you had asked me after that, if we made Tampa Bay Bowl or St. Peter Bitcoin, whatever the heck it's called now, that and the Belk Bowl, I'd be pretty happy. In hindsight, looking at beating only the terrible teams, I guess because we're state, we're used to surprising some teams. I guess I'd be a little disappointed. I think we're on par with what we realistically probably should have expected 3 years in. But like Dustin just mentioned again, 17's the year.
Right.
If we're still winning 6 and 7 games in 2 years, then I think, or if he goes and wins 9 or 10 next year and then 6 the next year, whatever, that's fine. But if we win 7 and 7 again, I think it's pretty fair to see what other options there at least may be. Maybe not necessarily get rid of him, but at least look at those options. I think we'll be okay.
I mean, step back and look, and he's not had a quarterback that he's recruited out of high school and developed at all start a game.
Mm-hmm.
He's had transfers. He's had a patchwork team. So I guess my thing is if you can patch a bowl team together, then you're doing okay. Now, can you build your team from scratch from, incoming freshmen on up? And we just don't know that yet.
Yeah,
I think there's a good chance if Jalen comes in and plays like he should, then great. But if he just shows no growth from high school, then I don't know that 17 even matters. I mean, he's going to play like a freshman, but he's got to be a good freshman next year.
So here's my point on that. Why the hell didn't Jalen McClendon get really any meaningful snaps this year?
Fair question.
Yeah, I think it goes to the loyalty thing with Doeren. I mean, Jacoby has been his guy since, and he said it. The day that Jacoby signed and was coming in, he was like this. He even said it while Brandon Mitchell was still quarterback. He was like, this is his team. Anyone else that wants to be quarterback can pretty much, get the hell out of here, almost in a way. And I think it was just he really, really, really loves Jacoby and doesn't want it to be like a Marquise Williams-Trubisky situation that they had going on last year where it's like people are doubting, hey, is this just to get the guy warmed up or is there a question? Especially with, State's fan base having a rap for, fair or not, having a rap for being quick to pull the trigger on these things. I really think that's part of it. It would have been nice. There were a couple games that, we were up 2 touchdowns with,
Right.
A minute left, and it's like just at least let him get some handoffs, maybe make a 2-yard pass or something. But
he said it so many times that you're exactly right. He said Jacoby's my guy. Now all he's got to say is, hey, we want to get Jalen some snaps. Let's get him in this game, third quarter, second quarter, somewhere, and get him some throwing.
Yeah,
right?
even
gets in the game and hands it off.
Even if it's against Eastern Kentucky, at least it's in the flow of the game where it's like, hey, he actually needs to throw a pass. Because, I mean, anyone except for Manny Stocker, apparently, can turn around and hand the ball off. If you remember that one.
Of course.
Yeah, just let him throw one slant pass and hand the ball off 2 times in the flow of a game. Would have been nice, but it's hindsight's 20/20. But it is scary not knowing how McClendon's going to handle a game situation next year, because we know he's got a great arm. We know he's got a good build. We know he can move relatively well, maybe not quite as well as Jacoby, but it would have been nice to see what does he do when the lights are actually on.
Yeah, I mean, I always get kind of disappointed, and I understand that you're not trying to show another team up, but in those situations where you are up big late and you have an opportunity to bring a guy in, I still want to see, okay, let this kid throw some. I mean, it doesn't. Maybe you don't take home run shots, but at least
let him throw an out route.
let him stand in the pocket against an oncoming rush that's trying to keep him from scoring on him, and see what he can do.
And I think at that level, there's an understanding with the coaches of, hey, these are all the backups they're throwing, so they're not putting Jacoby and Matt Days in here and trying to run up the score. They're just trying to get their guys better, and I think all the coaches can respect that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just burned from the Chuck Amato years when Jay Davis took over. he didn't play at all. We were both thinking this guy's going to be the next Phillip Rivers, and then you're like, holy cow, he's terrible.
Yeah.
He was a 4-star kid out of Florida.
Yeah, and nobody, we never saw him. And I think if you get him in the game, you kind of identify that a little bit. But
right. Yeah, not every kid can be Russell, where they just come in and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, this kid's ready to go out of nowhere.
Yeah, and there's not a whole lot of them, but there are guys that get in there and get to play.
Yeah, there's guys that are better players than practicers and vice versa.
Yeah,
but we don't know that now.
Yeah, I was really kind of befuddled why he didn't get any meaningful snaps this year, given the situation. Even the bowl game, we're getting slaughtered. Jacoby's getting beat the hell the whole game. Just put him in there. Let him get some throws in or something,
Well, I mean, even if you're looking at a coach saying, well, I need to be loyal to my guy, one sign of loyalty is not letting him get beat beat to death when you're up big or when the result is no longer in doubt. Don't let Jacoby stand back there and keep getting pounded. Not that you want Jalen getting pounded, but I mean, at least you're taking him out and avoiding a catastrophic ankle injury or something that could have really put you in a pinch when you realize that your backup hadn't gotten any steps to that point in the season. So,
yeah.
We're running right at about an hour, so maybe we should wrap this up. But I did want to ask you guys about looking forward to 2016. I pulled up the schedule here. We got bagged pretty bad this year for playing 4 crap teams. But next year we face off against East Carolina and Notre Dame as part of the non-conference schedule. We open up with William and Mary, and then we got ECU in Dowdy-Ficklin. Should be a party there. And Old Dominion.
Take protection.
You may want to get vaccinated after you leave.
So, seeing that there's a little bit of an upgrade in the, schedule strength this year or in 2016, do you think we're going to see this team, be able to post 7 wins? Or maybe the question should be, if this team posts 7 wins next year against that schedule versus this year's schedule, do you feel like we're still trending upwards, or is 7 wins no matter what still kind of holding pat?
I think 7 wins next year would be pretty good. I don't think I'd have too many complaints. I mean, obviously, it depends on how the season plays out. Who do we beat? Who do we, lose? But honestly, looking at that schedule without the cupcakes, that'll be, if we win 7 games, I think that might actually, without, having Jacoby and having a lot of young players still, I think that would actually be a pretty decent season. I don't think I'd be upset with the win total. At least 7-5 regular season. After that, it's hard to judge. But
I guess it'd be worth noting that when we face East Carolina, that'll be just the second game of the Scotty Montgomery era there in ECU. So they'll most likely still be trying to find their sea legs, unless Scotty Montgomery just completely turns ECU into a mess overnight. So, I mean, I would think we would be favored in that game. So I guess, looking at that, maybe Notre Dame is the only game on the non-conference schedule that we wouldn't be favored to win. Of course, I don't know. William and Mary and Old Dominion may not be pushovers. Lord knows, seems like every team up on the Eastern Seaboard or the Atlantic Seaboard is starting to get better these days.
We should be able to just run the ball against those teams with the guys we have.
Yeah,
assuming everybody's healthy and the offensive line isn't horrible. The game that concerns me is, of course, we get Miami coming to Raleigh next year to start the Mark Richt era. That's going to be a tough one, I think.
I mean, they played great down the stretch this year.
Yeah, and they have talent that's getting used. They just didn't have anybody that could really manage their program. That's what I'm thinking. If we get four conference wins next year against the schedule that's coming in, that'd be pretty impressive.
Right. Yeah. We go to Syracuse, Carolina, Louisville, and Clemson. I don't think Syracuse is going to be very good, but Dino Babers is a hell of a coach, so
it's kind of a scary game.
That's not going to be an easy one, depending on if they're on their 7th-string quarterback still.
yeah, they've had the worst injury luck of any program I've seen in a while.
So, next year's going to be tough. I don't have a great feeling.
7 wins is a success.
Yeah.
Because we're going to lose to Notre Dame, so that would be picking up a conference game compared to this year, and I think that would be great. I mean, just fantastic. So
yeah.
And I guess we would be remiss if we had asked for questions from folks and didn't answer the ones that we actually got. Turbo Pack 33 did ask us about thoughts on our O-line next year. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at, depth chart. Maybe Matt, you're a good one to ask on this. I always turn to personnel questions to you because the folks who are coming in. He asked if Adams might be moved to center and who would play, left tackle. Would it be McGirt, Richardson, Jones?
Yeah, I think actually I was thinking about that the other day. I think Adams will be moved to center. I think he's got the experience and the ability to do that. I think looking at Joe Giglio's depth chart, he's usually pretty good at that. He surprisingly had Aaron Wiltz as, I think, left or right tackle. He's a redshirt freshman. And then McGirt at the other one, I think. So those would be two redshirt freshmen at tackle. I don't think Wiltz will start, at least if you ask me. I think McGirt may, whether or not he starts off the season that way. But I think he'll end up being a starting tackle at some point next season. And then probably Richardson and maybe Tyler Jones inside, or either him or Teron Prescott would be my guess.
I'd be surprised if Richardson didn't get one of those spots, considering he played this year.
Yeah, I thought he did fairly well for a freshman in the ACC. He didn't. I don't remember him getting embarrassed. He was still losing a lot of baby fat. He had kind of a different shape coming in. Whereas someone like Emmanuel McGirt, I think he's going to be physically ready when he comes in. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. But I would say, you probably have Adams. I'm blanking on. There was one other lineman that started that's not graduating this year.
Bradbury.
Yeah, Bradbury could. I think there's actually a decent amount of options on the line. They're just going to be really young. But if I had to guess, I'd say you had Adams, Richardson, McGirt, probably Tyler Jones, and maybe Bryce Kennedy.
Prescott?
Prescott was what I mentioned earlier. It's good. Yeah. He's got the size, and he's got the upper body strength. I don't know about his footwork. We haven't gotten to see him much this year. So I think interior, we're going to be fine. It's just going to be a matter of who do we have on the edge.
We also have a new O-line coach coming in, presumably.
Yeah.
So, and there's some, there's 4-star guys in there. If you look at those numbers, Richardson was a 4-star, Prescott was a 4-star, McGirt was a 4-star. So there's some talent on the offensive line. Just a matter of getting them some reps and getting a coach in there to handle that.
Yeah. I think it'll be okay, at least as the season goes on.
I have one more point before we close, and that is, I feel like if you look at what Doeren's doing, if you look at the guys who he's recruiting and who he's recruiting against, so I think you always look at the scholarship offers that these kids have, versus the stars. I think that's a little bit more telling.
Mm-hmm.
I think the guys he's recruiting overall, it's just a different level than what Tom O'Brien was. Tom O'Brien's recruiting against ECU and Old Dominion.
Yeah.
And what reminded me of that is Richardson, what came down to us in Florida State, and Doeren got him from Florida State. I think you're seeing that more and more. These guys were losing guys to Clemson, but hey, we're losing guys to Clemson. They're in a damn national title game.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. You're not losing them to Wake Forest and stuff.
That's why I come back to and say, I think Doeren's going in the right direction. I get frustrated just like everybody else. But I think if you look at it and get down into the details, I think to me he's going the right way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree with you on that, both on the looking at who's offered and, hey, at least he's fishing in big waters. He's not just, hey, I just want to put a team together. I don't think that does you any good.
You can't strike out if you don't even try and bat.
Right, and you can always get the kids that are committed to ODU and ECU in January. If you just throw an offer at them, you get 90% of them. So, and I think that's mostly what Doeren's doing, unless he falls in love with a kid. I mean, shoot, none of us can admit that we knew who Jalen Samuels was until he committed. He's a good camp evaluator, so that's when he does go for those 2- and 3-star kids. So I trust his judgment on that. And he's at least fighting for him.
Was until after he committed, and even after he committed, I didn't know who he was.
So. Yeah, I just remember there was like a 2-day camp where we had like 7 commitments, and we knew who like 2 of them were. I think it was like Jermaine Pratt and like one other person, and I was like, who the heck is Jalen Samuels? Why are we taking a fullback? And then I watched this film and I was like, holy cow, this kid's amazing.
Yeah.
And so I think he does a good job of outside of the camp offers. He fishes for the big guys, realizes, like Bryce Banks, 2-star kid, but, we came in on him on December and they must have liked him because they missed on the bigger kids. At that point, that's fine because you can still fill a roster. But at least he's going for, Overton and Lawrence and these guys. He's staying in the race for them.
And Banks was committed to the SEC, so
yeah.
He's not just a jabroni 2-star.
Yeah, he's a 2-star, but he's from Missouri. People may not have seen him. Seems to have good size. He's enrolling early. I think there's a lot of credence in that. You can get a kid an extra semester on campus. There's things outside of just the star ranking.
Is there a recruiting service that does just based off of offer lists?
I did that for us. Our first, one of the first times that you had me on, but that was just for us. But 247 kind of does that.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of
I'm with Evan. I think if you go by offer list versus what some knucklehead says on a site. I mean, that's me on a recruiting websites or whatever. But if we're going up against SEC schools and programs that are ahead of us in prestige and are either beating them or are at least in the mix until the very end, I mean, that is a good sign. So, I guess that's pretty much it. Richard Aver did weigh in with a question about Huxtable also getting the golden parachute, but I think we talked about, about feeling like if this might be a sign of Doeren taking more of a command in the defense. Any other closing?
Sorry. Yep, I got one more question for Dustin. How did the thunder sticks or the statement sticks sound at the bowl game?
Oh yeah,
like complete failure. It was bad. I mean,
is it like the failure gong and whatever that show was?
Yeah, it was like just a sad face. I mean, people were what really pissed me off is people beating the shit out of them while we were on offense. Like they don't comprehend that. Oh wait, we need to be quiet now. Just like people that loudly cheer at Carter Finley. But it didn't really compare to the those cowbells are loud as hell. I mean, they really are. And I think they could have ended up with a bigger crowd than us or close to it. Because I think, you're from there, you buy tickets, you're going to come, you're going to go no matter what. And then I think a lot of people here didn't go because of the weather. Mm-hmm. So the crowd was awful. I mean, we should be ashamed, really. An in-state bowl game should have been close to capacity, but we had people not want to get wet. My boots were still wet the next day, but you know what? It's in-state. You got to go.
Yeah, the cowbell thing. Like I want to know just how. Like, did you have anybody around you with cowbells, or were you pretty much isolated in an NC State section?
I was in a state section. Now, going in, you could hear them just loud, obnoxious people beating them walking around the concourse. A couple of the drunk guys, but they really carry, though, from the other side of the stadium.
Okay. I just don't know how they're legal. I mean, I to this day, I mean, I don't know how you can, based off of a tradition, say, well, we've banned every other artificial noisemaker, but this one will allow. And
they police it really well in the SEC.
Yeah.
And the officials know when to penalize them if the bells ring when they're not supposed to. That was not the case. I mean, they rang them whenever they wanted nonstop.
I had some yokel Mississippi State fans show up in my mentions about it and, said, well, they know when not to ring it. And I'm listening to the game on the radio. And, I mean, Tony Haynes' field mic, or the radio crew's field mic. I mean, you could clearly hear them ringing all the way up to and after the snap of the football.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was infuriating. But
yeah, it was bad. That made me angry. And then was it like talked about on the broadcast how we were called North Dakota State?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that happened.
We were just kind of stumped. Like, well, that just makes perfect sense. Yeah, I just didn't know if the TV called it and made a deal about it or not.
Oh yeah, the play-by-play guy on TV just laughed immediately. Like, oh my! I mean, you could tell he was flabbergasted that this guy. didn't know
Where
where
was the crew from?
Pac-12.
Yeah.
So
Which
where did they get
explains
North
a lot.
Dakota?
I don't
I mean,
know.
how does that even happen
That's what I was
when
saying.
they're
It's not
in
like,
our
it's not-
state too?
Right.
Like,
It's not like we're from, we're the small state and they're the big state or something.
that
It
guy's
only
a
happens to
Carolina
us.
grad. I'm telling you.
Like, I could even understand if they say North Carolina. It happens.
Yeah.
You're like speaking in front of all kinds of people, but the North Dakota state that was something different.
It was almost so
State's
crazy.
pretty good.
Yeah, we would be on a pretty kick-ass winning streak at this point. I think.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't mind being them right now.
We've won like what? Something like 4 FCS titles.
Yeah, like 3 in a row and 4 of the last 5 or some crazy thing.
Well, we won't get into the whole relegation argument.
I'm pro relegation.
Yeah, I am too.
Well, maybe this is a good spot to end the show. I've enjoyed it. This was a really good, fun conversation, and maybe when the opportunity presents itself, we can talk some basketball.
Please. Please, man.
I couldn't resist picking at that scab right before we the show.
I think we should definitely do it when seasons are over. So we'll talk to y'all soon after
Postmortems.
track and field's over. And,
Yeah.
Rifle season, man.
yeah. Hey, we're good at rifle, aren't we?
Yeah,
We should be.
or at least we
We
used
do
to
a
be.
post-wrestling season.
Hey.
Sure.
Yeah,
They're doing
that
great.
works. We just read a bunch of rankings because it's about all we can do.
We'll get Guzzo back on the show later.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm James Curle. That's Matt Purdy. And we're the Riddick and Reynolds side of this equation.
I'm Evan. He's Dustin. We're the Red White Podcast side.
That's it.
We will talk with you guys next time.
Thanks,
Take it
guys.
easy. Go Pack.
Tar.
All right.
Yeah, go back. Sorry, Dustin. I trampled all over your go.
That's all right. That's all right. They get the point. They get
So does everybody else.
the point.